My name is Ryan Downey. I'm the West Coast editor for Alternative Press magazine, and I just want to first say thanks to the Musicians Institute and all of you for being here. This is hopefully the first of many of these that we're going to do. I couldn't think of a better band for us to start this off with. So, Black Veil Brides. When was the last time you were in a school before now?
Quite a long time. For me, I don't know. I mean,
I don't remember, man. Yeah, it's been a long time.
it's cool though. I walked by the lockers. I haven't seen lockers in a long time. That made me happy. You guys have the combination locks and everything.
So just to get us going here, I thought it would be great to actually go down the line with each of you and talk a little bit about first sort of discovering music and what some of the early stuff was that you loved and whether it's family member, friend, how you kind of discovered things, and at what point and how you sort of knew that you wanted to do this, that you wanted to create and play and perform and tour, versus being a spectator or just a fan.
I think for me it was probably pretty early on. I discovered Kiss like a lot of people do when they're really young, and sort of had that. My initial interest was in the aesthetic, obviously. I think sometimes people are criticized when they're younger for being so involved or interested in the aesthetic of a band or a group. The point I like to make to people is that when you first find the Ninja Turtles, your first interest is in the visuals. You don't think about the sort of the ethos behind the Ninja Turtles or the significance of the artist names or anything. You sort of have that, I want to be a ninja, I want to look cool or whatever. And so at 3-4 years old, my first kind of introduction to music was that Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, the idea that they kind of look like the superheroes that were in the comic books that I had as a kid. Through that sort of parlayed my interest into more I guess aesthetically based groups, found bands like the Misfits and Lords of the New Church and punk bands more specifically. And then through finding punk rock music, that sort of really, for me, spearheaded the interest in songwriting and kind of the angst and political nature and the lyrical nature of the songs. So for me, that was really, it kind of all came from the initial love of Kiss and Motley Crue and Wasp and kind of went more into a more intrinsically lyrical thing. And for better or for worse, it really is my biggest interest in music is the form of communication that it provides.
And that communication can be through not just the music, but like you're saying, also the overall visual aesthetic and presentation, where artwork.
Sure, yeah. I think that bands that have a defined aesthetic or something that is say people would look at an older image of us with the black paint and the hair and everything. There is such a bad rap that is given to that, as in the idea that you often hear kind of the turn of phrase, the idea that if they spent more time on their music and not their makeup or those kind of things, which is so inherently silly because it takes 5 minutes to put on makeup and it takes years and years of practice to have an instrument that you really truly know and to be able to write songs, regardless of how people feel about our songs or any other band's songs, to know how to do that is a skill in itself. So for us, the aesthetic or the presentation was always about giving a show and kind of having that feel of the bands that we grew up loving.
Yeah, and I always, whenever I've heard someone say about any band, like, oh, those guys wear eyeliner, my immediate go-to is always, well, yeah, Mike Ness wears eyeliner.
Sure, and that really was...
Lou Reed wore eyeliner.
And we've talked about that. That's, to me, and all of us, there's always this kind of stigma that's put on to current music, which is... or current hard rock music, which is the label of emo. I don't really know what it means. From my understanding, emo kind of comes from like Sunny Day Real Estate and that kind of stuff. My interest in, eyeliner or whatever you want to call it, came from Mike Ness or, Stiv Bators or Glenn Danzig or Jerry Only or any number of people that, to me, were not necessarily feminine, not that there's anything wrong with that, but they were more. It was a representation of almost like they were a larger than life entity. So the not necessity, but the feeling behind any of us putting on these aesthetics came from wanting to have that vibe. And I think that, Ashley's talked about that a lot with his first interest in Motley Crue came from seeing a hot girl wearing a Motley Crue shirt. It wasn't because he had some sense of sadness about him. It was more just kind of, I want to be like that guy.
Yeah, Ash, you originally came out here to be a lead singer in a band. Right. So let's talk about your original interests. And I mean, you have a I don't know if everybody knows, but he's got a background in fashion, design, all sorts of stuff aside from playing bass in BVB. He's bored hearing about himself.
Yeah. I meant the way I started too is as a young kid, man, music was everything to me. Just escapism. I grew up from a small Midwest town in Missouri. And that era of time is, watching Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. And that what inspired me to play music, because escapism is another world. When people come to Hollywood and they think that, there's this land of dreams and all this thing that you can achieve anything. So it was that sort of, just escapism for where I was from. So just chasing that dream, I think, was my main aspiration of doing stuff. It didn't necessarily have to do with music right away. It was the lifestyle of what that was perceived as, and I think that's sort of, long story short, how our band sort of is there's a identifiable unit to our group that when you feel lost or disenfranchised, you feel a belonging to our group, and that's been missing for a long time in rock and roll. And that's sort of where I felt that I was as a kid too, looking for something you can attach yourself to. And a lot of those elements when we got together felt like it was like home. It brought it all together. And when we got together, when me and Andy got together, it was finding a group that we always wanted to be in, or that didn't exist, whether it's sonically or physically or imagery. So it took a lot of those sort of elements that were missing to, strive and drive and do that sort of thing.
The bands and artists who have the most sort of connectivity with their audience and the most enduring legacies that we tend to think of as the important bands of yesterday and today are the ones who, like you said, sort of set out to create something that was missing. Or they go, I really like this, this, and this, but if I could take this from there and get rid of this part and put it all together, that'd be like the perfect band to me.
And that's what we never understood when people try to lump us into and pigeonhole us and you're this kind of band or you're this and that. We didn't understand that. We just understood where we were from and the things that we liked, as kids. And I think that everyone has their musicians or the bands that they like, and you emulate certain things until you find the other group members that come together and you form what you are to be, And so, I don't know.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a matter of taking the things that you love and putting it through your own prism, which is automatically going to reshape it and make it something different.
Yeah, that's another thing for aspiring musicians that I feel is like everyone's like, I want to sound like this, I want to sound like this. And it's like, you're only going to sound like what you're going to sound like. I mean, that's the first faux pas right away starting bands and doing stuff is like, everyone's like, I want to sound like this band. You're not going to. Just sound like you're going to sound. Like, get in a band, get in a room with people, and that's what's be. And then it's authentic too, so.
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, obviously as a vocalist, in some ways it's difficult to immediately feel the sense of musicianship. It's a lot of times singers are sometimes sort of marginalized because if you're not an incredible singer, you're sometimes seen as maybe particularly in the day and age of like American Idol, where the ability of the voice is kind of the main driving factor behind a singer. My heroes in singing were always people who had a very interesting voice, and that was on every level of our band, from not just the singing to the guitar playing and everything else, is having something that was different. You can criticize something that maybe is not commonplace or something that sounds different to something else, and you can say that you don't enjoy it or that it sounds bad or whatever else. But at the end of the day, the idea of doing something that is intrinsically yourself and important to yourself is kind of a blanketed statement, regardless of whether you're a singer, guitar player, or you're into the business of music. Having something that is definable to you and proprietary to you is an important fact.
I think that's so important, and I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I think, having a unique point of view, that's what matters to me. It doesn't have to be your point of view. You don't have to agree with what an artist is trying to say creatively or politically or whatever their thing is. But for me, it's just always been about bands that had something to say in some way that was confident and definitive. And yeah, like you were saying, in the age of American Idol, I always laugh about Jennifer Lopez and Steven Tyler being judges. Not to say that they aren't talented as people or smart or, you know, successful, but just in the sense of pure singing ability. If Jennifer Lopez were to walk into American Idol,
I could never in a million years make it past the door on American Idol, you know, or any of the other ones. But I have a recording contract, and all the things that are sort of supplied as the idea that it is the ultimate in the music industry. I have a huge level of respect for people who can sing like that, and I wish that I could. I cannot. You know, I think anybody who's heard the band knows that I have a very specific sounding singing voice and is often criticized because of it, but it's not because I'm not trying. It's just that that is what I have, and I've tried my best to sing with what I do have. There's people who do enjoy it, and for us in our band, that's true of every single member of the band. You have the skills that you have. But I think that for any of us in a rock band specifically, it is so driven by passion and heart and the idea that you're going to do something that is true to you and the true beliefs of how you feel, that it doesn't necessarily matter the incredible level of talent that you have or the God-given talent, whatever you want to call it, but the drive is always most important.
How many of you guys are from California, like native to California? So Cece, I believe you are the only native Californian on the stage.
Yep.
So tell us about, and I'm gonna start with the lead, as they say in journalism, which is that initially when you had the opportunity to join this band, I don't think you took it very seriously and thought that these guys really had a whole lot.
He wanted to join Avenged Sevenfold.
So bring us from point A to point B to what was going on with you before you encountered these guys.
Well, I gave up on music because I was let down so many times from the industry. Whether it's being a session musician and getting ripped off on particular sessions, being promised X, Y, and Z, and not getting that. Being a percussive member of whatever band or group I was performing with. There was promises made that weren't necessarily kept, after the recording process was. And so, joining bands, touring bands, and, doing all of that, and just constantly being let down and not having bands take off, so to speak.
Let me stop you there for a second, because I think that's an important thing, particularly with drummers, for whatever reason. I know a lot of drummers who have a great second and third career as session guys. If you had been able to attend the Musicians Institute and come to something like this, what are some of the things you wish you would have heard about how to avoid, like you said, being ripped off, lied to?
Well, I think going to MI definitely opens doors, being like a session guy. You make tons of contacts, and in the entertainment industry, that's one of the biggest things is having a Rolodex with people to know, or having your name being referred to other musicians. Especially being a drummer. Oh, this guy's awesome. Use him on a session, use him here and there, and there's a more. I think that it's more lucrative, so to speak, to do that instead of rolling the dice, but I'm kind of a Hellraiser badass. I was like, no, let's roll the dice. It's like all or nothing for me. And so I wasn't really feeling the session thing, and I was let down from touring and just, contracts fell through, no one was coming out, whatever. So I gave up on music, and I was presented the opportunity to join Black Veil. And at first I was, a little reluctant to say yes, because I had a bunch of stuff. I was working with the band. I was working at a hospital, so I had, a normal paycheck. But I was working with a band out of Denver. Avenged just fired Portnoy, and one of their engineers was like, dude, I'm gonna get you an audition with Avenged. And then I
told you.
It's true. It actually is true. But I played with.
That's another one of those broken promises.
Yeah, and it's all a lot of it is BS. And the longer you're in the industry, jaded is such a cliche term, but so many people get jaded from being ripped off or promises like you're the next biggest thing, and then you sign to a label and they just shelve you. And so I kind of gave up on it, and just working at a hospital, hating my life, and I was like, well, I know I should be doing music. And in a previous side project, I played with Jake and Jinx, and it just so happened that I think Jinx joined first and was working, and I think it was one of our rehearsals that he actually asked you, like, hey, dude, I'm working with this band. Do you want to go on a tour for a week or something? And I was like, what the hell are they working on? But I was like, whatever, dude, I'm going to go mess with, medical charts or whatever, carry body parts and shit. So I was like, whatever. But, I mean, it was really interesting now, looking back at the whole process to how I was reluctant. And one night, like right before I was going to sleep, I was like, I'm an idiot if I don't take this, because they were, signed into the Universal Republic and they had the image, but I wasn't an image conscious person. But, I think it's very important to realize as a person, you guys ask yourself, what's success to you? Is it creating a movement? Is it making lots of money? Is it touring the world? Is it having a lot of fans? Or is it just having years and years and years of doing what you love? Money will come down. It's kind of like a roller coaster with income, and you have to ride the wave. But I mean, it's what a level of success is to you. And if you want to, like, quote unquote make it, whatever that may be, I think you could be the best musician in the world, but there definitely has to be a keen business sense to making it a lasting career move.
And that's something that for us, there's a huge line that you have to cross at some point, which is that when you're younger, you believe that there is something that exists called a sellout. And the reality is that there is not a fork in the road. There's not a time where, at least for us in our experience, there's not a time where you're faced with a decision where now I'm going to sell out. It is a constant everyday thing where you wonder, I could be wearing head-to-toe energy drink logos right now, and I could be receiving, $20,000 to be sitting here. That is a choice that I wouldn't want to make, and it really comes down to what you as an artist want to do for yourself, and not to sound pretentious in the way of referring to an artist as, oh, I'm an artist, but legitimately you create art regardless of what you're doing in any facet of music or the music industry. The decision to either sell out or continue down your path is one that can only be decided by you, and is not necessarily a financial decision, because I could absolutely use the money that would come from wearing Coca-Cola logos all over myself, but it doesn't mean that I have any interest in it, because aesthetically or artistically, whatever you want to call it, I don't have that in me. And that's for all of us constantly true, is that we're presented with opportunities and ideas that you have to make the decision that you feel educated enough to make. I think in many ways, something like MI presents you with the opportunity to feel educated for those decisions. In our situation, we didn't have that. You learn as you go, and we were burned. We signed a record contract out of the gate, the first one that we were offered, because we felt like maybe nobody else would offer us a record contract. And I'm not going to go down the road of throwing people under the bus with a label, but we were in a position where we would have been pretty much fucked for the rest of our career had we had to stay with that label. We were fortunate enough to find people who were willing to represent us for no money in terms of lawyers, and we met Dina LaPolt through a contact that Ashley had, and she got us out of that deal.
She's the attorney for Motley Crue.
Yeah, many other people. And had we not had that, we wouldn't be sitting here. We wouldn't have the opportunity to do anything. We would, in effect, owe our entire career and lives to one guy in an office in Cleveland who I don't have anything against him as a person, but the contract that we were given was ludicrous and something that had, because we didn't have the education to know otherwise, we're willing to sign because we wanted to be on a record label. That is criminal in many ways. The idea that there is an industry that has bred a fear of artists to people that could potentially give them money. The bank system of labels sometimes can be positive, and currently, with us, with Universal, we have a situation where we've had nothing but positive experiences. No, we don't make $1 million all the time, but we do have a label that makes our records happen and gives us a budget, and we're very fortunate to be in that situation. It's not always true. And had we had the opportunity to learn more about the industry prior to getting into this, I feel like we might have been equipped to spend a little bit more time, as you might say, playing the field. Look, we're a rock band. I sometimes make the joke that it's like being a rotary telephone salesman. In this day and age, in terms of popular opinion in the top 40 music, most of what we do is not, we're barely keeping the lights on for Universal. You know what I mean? There's not billions of record sales. We do it because we love it. People are afraid, and understandably so, to make large moves or to change themselves because they fear that their minimal cash flow will go away because they know that it's very hard to keep a band or artist running in this climate. People make the same record over and over again because they feel that it'll sell to the same number of people, and as those numbers dwindle, then they make some big move to try to get to a new group of people. this climate doesn't allow in many ways for artistic changes. If you look at someone like David Bowie and having all these different eras of Ziggy Stardust or the White Duke or all these things, you couldn't really have that in today's climate because those kind of lateral moves in terms of imagery or style could potentially cost you your career, so people are afraid to make those moves. I think that with that in mind, it's important to remain understanding of when an artist makes a change, because maybe, or they don't make a change. Maybe they are, a band like Rise Against, who I love. They make a record that sounds like Rise Against every time, and Rise Against fans love that record. I have many friends who've been in bands who have done the opposite. One of my closest friends is William Francis, who is in a band called Aiden. Aiden was a band that was a very dark kind of pop-punk, misfitsy kind of band, and then he decided that he wanted to go for something different, and they made the Conviction record, which was, wearing pink and brighter songs and singing about hope. And they found themselves with the bottom falling out. They found that their fans weren't interested anymore. Those are risky moves in an industry where your tomorrow is never determined. If you notice, Black Veil Brides, we've never had two records that sound the same. We went from what some people would call a metalcore sound with the more screaming and that kind of stuff. And we didn't change on Set the World on Fire because we wanted to appeal to a new market. We changed because that's how we felt. We don't ever sit around and have big evil meetings about how we're going to appeal to a new market and, we're going to sell out. We go, you want to make a new record? And we do. And it turns out that we are now 2 years older than we were before, and our artistic interests have changed. Maybe some of them are the same. Maybe we make a song that sounds like the previous record, but from Wretched and Divine to the self-title that we just did, the change was we got closer as friends and as a band, and we didn't feel that we needed to do a big sweeping story. We wanted to do a rock and roll record that felt true to who we were because we were getting along and enjoying it. That's a move that maybe to some may be perceived as risky, or you can't follow up a concept record or that kind of thing, but it really was us doing something that was because we loved it. And this is very long-winded of an answer, but I really do want people to, if nothing else, respect and understand all of us in this room as artists, and the outside world is understanding that people who make moves, regardless of what they are in their career, may be perceived as selling out, but often for them is something that they're just trying to keep afloat and to continue their career and their art.
Amen. Well, I'm old enough to remember it being a big deal when Metallica cut their hair, and I would say to my friends at the time, "You cut your hair." Sure.
And it's also hard to have long hair when you're losing your hair.
There's that also.
I've heard.
Not that anyone on stage has any idea what that's like.
I don't know, but I have a healthy head of hair.
You do. It's gorgeous.
Thank you. Do you want to touch
Jake,
it?
hi. There you are.
Hey.
You're like sunk into the couch.
Sleeping over here.
I don't know if everyone knows this in here, but I think this will definitely be of interest at the Musicians Institute. In addition to being a guitar shredder extraordinaire, you're also a producer, engineer yourself.
Yes, I actually went to the LA Recording School down the street.
We have an educated person on the stage. It's not me.
One.
I don't know if I'd call it
We
that.
got one.
I come from a very musical family, so for my 10th birthday, my dad got me an acoustic guitar, and I fiddled around with it for a little bit, threw it in the closet, and I just wasn't into it yet. So when I was 13, I discovered Metallica, and I pulled it back out, and that's what it just changed my life right there. Before, I wanted to be like a fighter pilot and go into the Air Force and do all that. But then I discovered Metallica, and it just changed my my whole plan. So I pulled the guitar out and started playing, or trying to. I couldn't play at all, but my dad would get home from work every day and see I was taking it serious, and I had it out every day after school. So I took guitar lessons for about 4 months, and then my teacher just disappeared. He didn't work at the place anymore, so I just decided to just kind of go on my own and figure it out along the way. So not only, when I discovered the Black Album, it wasn't just the guitar playing, it was, I discovered at a young age the guitar tone, and I paid attention to that, and I wanted my guitar to sound like that. So not knowing anything, I saved my money up, got an expensive Seymour Duncan pickup, put it in my guitar, and wondered why it didn't sound like the Black Album. So I had to learn, I need a good amp, I need, there's such a long process of things you need to get great guitar tone. And it takes years to learn all that kind of stuff. And so I moved out to LA and I was in bands a long time ago. Like CC talked, a lot of false promises and, oh, this is going to happen, and nothing happens, and you get bummed out. Quit that band, whatever. But I kept doing music.
You even had sort of a patron at one point, right? Who's like funding your band to, supposedly make all these things happen, and then it just stops.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know. I just kind of got the sense of, all right, everybody tells you like all these great things are going to happen, and none of it ever does. But I love music, and I started recording. And in 2006, I moved out to LA, and I went to the LA Recording School. And I had already started using Pro Tools and trying to, started figuring things out on my own. And I didn't really know what I was doing at that time, but I've been doing it for 10 years now, so I'm pretty good at it. But it takes you that long to learn something like that because there's so many different ways to do things, and there's so many different pieces of gear. If any of you guys are doing the recording part of things, compression, I would say, is probably one of the toughest things to get an ear for and actually realize what it does, when to use it, when not to use it, and whatnot. But I went to that school, and they taught me things, but what taught me the most was getting out and recording in studios and being in bands and working with producers and engineers and just watching them and being in the room and seeing how they do things. And you pick up, oh, that's how they do that. Cool. I'll try that when I go home. And you pick up things, and as the years go by, you start to learn things, and you get better and better and better. And it takes time. And I think the most important thing is just being out there and getting hands-on experience. And that can't really replace anything. I'm just kind of rambling on.
Ramble on, brother.
All right.
Also, the Black Album is the Metallica record that has Enter Sandman and Sad But True, all the big Metallica songs. Also, the biggest selling record of the SoundScan era, which is basically since they started counting record sales.
I have some more room now.
Which is an encouraging thought, as Andy was talking about being the rotary telephone salesman. And I think those of us who work around bands or write about bands or in management or whatever, we're kind of the typewriter repairman. But it's nice to think about the fact that the biggest record ever is still a rock record.
Yeah, I'm Jinx.
You guys know Jinx, right? He plays guitar in the Black Veil Brides.
Oh, man. All right. Well, I'm not going to sit here and tell you my life story because it's very long and brutal. And
He's been alive for 200 years.
Yeah, I've been alive for a very long time, and it's very long.
He can tell you about the Civil War if you want.
I really could. I could sit here and tell you about that all night long, but I'm not going to. Basically, I was born into a very musical family, but of all places, Des Moines, Iowa, where there is absolutely no music scene whatsoever. And but music was my life. I grew up with MTV. My parents were both in bands. My big brother was actually a huge influence on me. Taught me my first.
MTV was a TV station.
Oh yeah, MTV.
Music.
History lesson for you
now
guys.
they just play pregnant children, but there used to be music.
Yeah. As soon as the Civil War was over, there was MTV, and then that was it. Anyway.
As soon as it was over.
Yeah. Civil War, MTV, and now. All right. Two eras in history. So, history lesson. But anyway, no, but I grew up in a very musical family in Iowa where there was just no music scene whatsoever, whatever. But I was first influenced by musicians like Randy Rhoads. He played guitar for Ozzy for a bit, and that got me into classical music of all things. And even though my family's very rock and roll like that, I just found inspiration in that. I got really involved in classical music and picked up the violin, started taking private lessons at a very early age. And that's where I learned a lot about music in general, more than with guitar. I just pretty much picked it up by ear. Would just sit down and just try to learn my favorite songs. I didn't really have anyone to teach me, but I took private lessons and I learned a lot. And I would try to take what I learned in violin and play it on guitar, and I was like, oh, this would be a really cool metal riff, So I was kind of going back and forth, and I thought I was innovative, whatever, but I realized there were many other musicians who were doing the same thing, and so I discovered this whole wealth of. Anyway, long story.
No, this is the stuff I think they're interested in. So yeah,
right.
This is the place to talk about the violin. I know no one lets you talk about it in your band.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
More about the violin.
But you know, I was that kid. I was very quiet, and music was my life. I practiced you know, many hours a day, and you know, I was in the orchestra. Eventually, was in the Des Moines Symphony. And that was my first part-time job. I was playing in the symphony, and I actually made money for music for the first time in my life. And I was like, well, this is really cool.
And didn't you also, like when we first met you, you were doing violin like at weddings and stuff?
Yeah, and it became a freelance thing for me as well. You know, as a teenager, I would play for weddings and
How many bridesmaids?
What's that?
How many bridesmaids on your checklist?
Let's not go into that.
My girlfriend watches The Bachelor, so I've been using a lot of the terminology of the overnight date. Did you have any overnight dates with any bridesmaids?
His girlfriend watches The Bachelor. He just hears about it, apparently.
Right.
Look, I'm also in the room at the same time. If I happen to look at the TV, it's not my fault. It's like a weird emperor, guys. Have you seen that show? He's got all these people that are trying to date him. Super strange. I'm a singer, man. I don't know shit. Like, I just watch The Bachelor and...
You're a singer. That means you just asked for something and it showed up. Look at that. It's in your hand.
I'm all right.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
as
the power of a
miserable
lead
as that
singer.
guy, but I'm okay.
Anyway,
Jinx.
so
You were saying.
I'm still in high school.
You were telling us how many
part-time
bridesmaids.
job. Yeah, I'm playing in violin in the symphony, and yeah, I was about 17. This local band in town, metal band, like came along and like offered me a gig, and you know they just got signed, and it's a huge deal. Like nobody gets signed from Des Moines, Iowa, you know. But you know what? I turned it down because I was like, I'm gonna graduate high school. I'm gonna go off to school for music, and you know, I mean, they're never gonna make it anyway. You know? Well, yeah, and you know, I just continued playing symphony. I graduated high school, you know, top 5% of my class and everything. I was, you know, made my mom proud, and yeah, and then at the end of the year, I was just kind of like, you know, my maestro said, hey, you know, I'll help you get a scholarship to whatever school you want to get into, and I was like, no, I'm gonna take a year off to figure out what I want to do with my life, and because you know, I'm not sure where I want to go yet. And meanwhile, this band that I just turned down the gig for just is blowing up, and they're huge, and I was like, fuck.
What were they called?
I'm not going to say the name of it. Anyway.
Iowa.
But no, but it was, you know, I wouldn't change a damn thing, because it's like I took that year and I really thought about it, and you know, eventually, well, it was like obviously music was going to be, you know, all I wanted to do, and you know, but I wasn't ready to just jump in head first with it yet. You know, I needed to live a little bit.
Plus, what kind of mask would you wear? You don't even have a mask design.
Okay, all right. So
I just have like a coverall one now for just
but
like
you know,
just the zippers.
Yeah.
but I found guys, you know, people to play music with in Iowa, you know, but they just didn't have the same drive that I did. And you know, I realized right then and there, I was like, well, this is all or nothing. And I had to basically, I saved up all my money. And packed up, I bought a van, packed it up full of all my gear and everything, and I just moved to the West Coast. First place I landed was Portland, Oregon. Well, there wasn't much of a scene up there either. I spent a couple of years up there and sleeping on couches and, you know, doing God knows what odd jobs just to get by, and you know, playing in like 3 or 4 or 5 different bands. And eventually I ended up here and, you know, and doing the same thing until I finally found these guys, you know, and I'm glad that I stuck it out, and I just, because if I would have just gave up and been like, all right, you know, I'm going to get a job in an office or something, you know, I'd be so unhappy with my life. You know, I'm glad I stuck with it, and I'm glad I found these guys. You know, I mean, a lot of it's luck, but a lot of it's just, you know, perseverance.
All of us met each other, and I can't imagine this band with any other people. I mean, we have a unit. We have a unit. We have
at least 5, I hope.
You know, yeah. We are together in this, and it's something that, you know, that I wish that there was a more impressive story to it than we all met and we, you know, musically kind of really clicked and felt something great. And I feel like in this town, which is, you know, for all the misconceptions of the Boulevard of Dreams and the Dreamland and the Dream Factory, there is some reality to the fact that there are other people who have come out here with the same ideas, and people who want to make it and want to do something important, or you know, at least to go through the struggle with you and to work towards something with you.
These guys just worked with one of the most legendary producers in rock. I mean, not only Metallica, but also Motley Crue and Bon Jovi, and you know, his
The Cult.
resume is pretty impressive. The Cult. And he was a musician himself, which
Veruca Salt.
Veruca Salt.
Michael Bublé.
Bublé.
But yeah, I want to talk to you guys about some of the techniques that he did versus some of the things that you guys were used to. For example, he had you guys trying out different amps and different heads to get different tones. And I remember CC, you telling me, in this day and age, it's kind of crazy to actually have a producer be like, so what kind of drum tone do you want? Because, half the time I can say without naming any names, some of the bands I've written about, the drummer shows up for a day or two, the producer's usually not even there, it's an engineer. And what ends up on the record either isn't necessarily what that person played, and sometimes it's not even that person.
That band's called Verb the Noun, right?
I love every band we cover
Oh, yeah.
tremendously, and I support how they do things completely. But yeah, let's talk about
The trail off.
let's talk about some of those techniques and the differences between
Well, Bob approached me and said, "Oh, what kind of drum tone? What's your favorite drum tone?" And I was like, "Funny enough, it's probably the Black Album, because it's so upfront." He's like, "Guess what? I'm your dude," which is, whatever, little ironic.
Guess what? I'm your dude.
Big surprise!
Big surprise.
Anyways, having the drums so upfront and just massive was something that I definitely wanted for this album. We've always had some awesome drum tones, in our previous 3 albums, but for this one, I just wanted it maybe a little bit more low end and everything, and just his techniques. I had a really good drum tech. His name was Mike Fasano, and he tuned the kit like I would never even have hoped to tune it. It was like it exceeded my expectations so much. But just
even that guy, he's been a drum tech on a bunch of huge records.
Oh yeah, he used
huge
to tech
bands and
for
tours
like
with
Fleetwood Mac to
Green Day,
Avenged Sevenfold to
Green Day.
everybody. He was phenomenal.
Matt Sorum for years. He did Use Your Illusion, right?
True. Yeah. Speaking of Matt Sorum, so for certain songs, some of the more ballad songs, we actually had the snare drum, Big Red.
Pat Boone, Debbie Boone.
What?
Pat Boone, Debbie Boone. Do you want to do a sample of what Pat Boone, Debbie Boone is?
I won't even get into that.
Do. That's the fill on every song on Use Your Illusion, and we totally stole that, but we wanted to use that fill on our song on Walk Away.
Yeah, Walk Away.
And we used the same snare that's called Big Red, and it's a do.
Yeah, so the snare that's on November Rain was the same one, and just having the credibility.
That song was recorded during the Civil War, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah. But having the people with just the knowledge and experience, in the studio, especially for us being so young and having these dudes that have been around for 20 plus years or so, it was very beneficial to the record and just the way it came out. Especially for my drum tones. I know Jake. Funny enough, Jake was the one. He taught Bob about a lot of the new guitar techniques. Maybe we could touch on that.
So you have producer points on the album, is what he's saying, right?
No, I got an engineering credit, but I wish. So when it came to guitars, I don't know if any of you guys know what a Kemper profiling amp is. Yeah? All right. So Bob had no idea what this was, and we had been using them live, and so I brought this thing in, and basically when we did guitars, we spent 3 days, and I brought in all the different amps I have. I've got my own collection of heads in my studio at home, and I brought all those in, and then we basically just spent days profiling amps, and we set up 4 guitar cabinets in the live room. We had 3 mics on each cab. We were blending 3 heads at a time, and we ended up renting some heads just to try things out. So we had everything from a Diesel VH4, Mesa Road King, Bogner Uberschall, JCM 800, you name it. We tried it out and used it. And we just started blending different amps and getting sounds. Basically what we would do was we'd go into the live room, set an amp up, and just play it in there until it sounded good. We'd have Jinx play the guitar, and I'd mess with the knobs on the amp until it just sounded good in the room. And then we'd go into the control room, and Bob would go in and take each microphone and move it around the cone until we found a sweet spot, and then onto the next mic. And we would do that for each microphone. And then basically turn on the Neve console, have each microphone on, and you just have this massive guitar tone. So we profiled all the stuff with the Kemper, And basically, if you don't know what a Kemper Profile amp is it copies the signal chain from the guitar through the the microphones, the guitar cab, the heads, through the board, the preamps and everything, and captures that sound. And we just spent 3 days doing that. We tried it on bass amps as well, and just got a whole library of all these guitar tones. And then when it came to tracking the actual guitars, I did all of that in my studio. And one thing, a way to get great guitar tones, there's so many things go into it. I mean, from having new strings on your guitar to great preamps and microphones in the right place and all that stuff. But one thing that people might overlook when you're making an album is you have to track the parts over and over. So it's not just like, oh, you play the part once and that's it. You have to get that big wide guitar sound, you do a take and you pan it. I like to pan hard left and hard right, so 100% left, 100% right. And then I quad tracked everything, so then everything's doubled on each side. And then in choruses and bigger parts, I did it 8 times. So you can go in Pro Tools and go on the grid and use Elastic Audio and chop everything and make it perfect, but I didn't want to cheat and do any of that stuff, so it's literally just spending hours and hours sitting there playing the part until it's, you have to match yourself 8 times. Sometimes it gets a little difficult to have it super, super tight.
We somehow started talking about the Hysteria record, Def Leppard. There's a bridge in the title track where the guitars were recorded 1 string at a time, right?
Yeah.
You guys know this. Yeah. Pierce the Veil did that for a part on their new record just to fuck around and see what that's all about. And Vic was like, yeah, it didn't sound any different at all. But yeah, they had interns from the studio. Everybody got a shot.
We used
with the
Hysteria on Set the World on Fire as kind of our map for the vocals, because ultimately we didn't wind up doing that again because it was such a pain in the ass. But every single vocal on a song like Legacy or Rebel Love Song, I mean, there is an incredible amount of just talking in different and sometimes just talking with an accent. Now we're gonna say the lyric in a British accent and then stack that and then say that same thing an octave above and then do falsetto of that and then everybody does a gang of that same accent, and then it went on and on. We had so much vocals that went into that, and I think Hysteria is kind of that record that where there's just the peak of ridiculous amounts of vocals and guitar work and the height
that
of
record or anything Queen.
Sure.
But
I think that's kind of the stable thing there is kind of the Mutt Lange basing his shit off of the Queen ideal, say what John Feldman does, which is a lot of sampling, a lot of padded stuff.
And he's very vocal driven, whereas we're talking about Bob, and Bob's kick drum riff.
Absolutely.
And then a guy like Feldman is vocal melody.
Right, but also using a lot of loops and kind of little hidden stuff, and that's what I really love. A lot of the elements of the concept record that we did have such incredible number of strings and loops and noises and all that stuff that you hear in those classic used records that Feldman made. Those kind of
John Feldman, by the way, produced Wretched and Divine, and he's the Used, and actually the 5 Seconds of Summer is his big thing right now. Yeah. He did the new Sleeping with Sirens record. He's produced a lot of records sort of in the AP world. And he's out here, right? He lives out here somewhere.
Yeah, Woodland Hills.
Anything that's fan voted that these guys are in the category, you tend to win those. In fact, you even gave your fan award to a fan at our award show.
It is not. I think that the most important thing to point out when it comes to marketing or branding or whatever is to understand that what you're doing needs to be important to you. We don't put out things that we don't like. We don't post things that we don't like. We've never been in a situation where we're doing something hesitantly so that we can build a brand. We are a band, and we want people to obviously see that and have visibility. But at the end of the day, why not put a lot of effort into something? If you're going to make a t-shirt, why not make 7 t-shirts? And why not make 7 different kinds of that one t-shirt? Why not put everything you have into something? More often than not, bands that really like themselves and like their fans, regardless of who they are, from AC/DC to Slayer to Motorhead to the biggest bands in the world, the bands that we grew up idolizing, those are the bands that we all love so much and had the fucking t-shirt and had the fucking program and had the fucking poster and everything because we fucking loved it. It was part of our lifestyle.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. It's about community and lifestyle, and I think we're being authentic to who we are, and it's relatable. You know, I mean, that's the main thing to your audience and who you know approach is like it's relatable. And the same thing about branding, we were saying the bands that we grew up that we liked was Misfits and Kiss and Crew and Iron Maiden.
Dude,
you know what those
I'm
logos
all
look like,
about
right?
Crew.
Right. You know
All
what those
about
logos
Crew.
look like. You can fucking put it on your notebook. You can do all that stuff. You
Yeah.
know, so it makes sense. The same thing with our band. We approach things like that. We look at stuff. You know, our predecessors and things have happened, and we approach things the same way.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Only from the Misfits has become someone who's very close to all of us in the band, and he ships out the merchandise himself. He is constantly designing. A band like the Misfits and has all that kind of the staying power of the logo. It's something that comes from love for what you're doing. I do yoga. I'm fucking serious. I do.
But it's evil yoga.
It's evil yoga, it's just Danzig 2 playing the whole time and sweating. No, I think all of us, you try to find a part of yourself that is always the same, that maintains the same elements of who you believe yourself to be. For some of us, that is everything. I think that probably some of us in this band more than others have something. I know with me, I sometimes struggle with identity, or have in the past. I feel pretty comfortable now, but when I was younger, I've had struggles with my own identity and finding who I was as an 18-year-old or 17-year-old on the road and trying to live up to the expectations that I set for myself. I think it's really finding who you are and maintaining that, regardless of your social situation or who you're around or what people are saying to you about how positive the effect that you've had on them is. It's very easy to fall into the trap of believing the hype that is around you, regardless of what it is. If you sit in a room with 5 people and all 5 of them tell you that you've saved their life and that you're the greatest person of all time, we tend to start to believe that we are those things because it's so natural to want to feel that level of belonging with other people and that you are important to other people. What I've found is that when people say that to any of us in the band, that we've saved their life or that we've had a dramatic improvement on their life, that is for them, not for us. It is easy for me to accept that compliment and to say thank you so much, and that's the appropriate response. The appropriate response is not to feel that I've done anything, because the reality is that person saved their own life. That person is cheering for us because they love what we do in their own way. Our songs mean something totally different to them than they do to us. They've taken something and siphoned it into themselves, and it means something important to them. So the understanding that when someone says something positive to you, it's a reflection of how they feel about you, not how you project to the world.
I was in bands before, several bands,
Right.
and they were not the band I wanted to be in. Jinx and I actually met Andy at a party in the hills one day. It was just briefly, and
I was drunk and fighting the
Fighting a
pool
beach-
toys
yeah,
in the pool.
beach ball thing.
And it was on the show The Hills, right? You met on The Hills.
Yeah.
Is that already a dated reference?
It was a dated party. It was a company called Sugar Hooker, which
Yeah.
I think at the time was a thing. I don't know what it was.
I don't know what it even was.
Yeah, but that's what it was.
But I had heard he mentioned the band name or whatever, so I went home and checked it out, and the Knives and Pens video had just come out. It had like 1.5 million views or something.
That was the first time I
like,
ever listened to. Like,
yeah. So I heard that, and it already had like 1.5 million views. I was like, wow, that's a lot of views on YouTube. And I liked the riffing in it. I thought it was pretty cool. So at that point I didn't expect that this was ever going to happen, but Jinx hit me up and was like, hey, I've kind of been working with that band. Remember that band that we met at that party? It was like, yeah. And he played me a couple things, and then he asked if I wanted to help write some songs. I was like, yeah, sure. And he came over that night, and we just started working on stuff that became that first record. So absolutely I wanted to be in this band, and this is the band I've always dreamt of being in. I mean, basically what we did, each amp sounds different. So I got the main sounds from, for example, like a Mesa, the Diesel VH4, and then this Friedman amp. And that was a profile that we had that was blended, and it sounded really great. And that was the tone that we got that had the most note definition in it. So I used that as like the main guitar tone. And then we had another one that instead of the Friedman, there was a, what was it? A Bogner Uberschall, and used that for the quad tracking. And that was a little bit lower in the mix. So basically, we would take all of the tracks and kind of level each one out to kind of, okay, we want mostly that tone, but this will help thicken it up, and this will give some nice mids and whatnot. And then when it came to mixing, it was all, we used Neve EQs, and it went through several EQ chains to get the final tone. So it's a lot of tone shaping.
We couldn't get a show to save our life in Hollywood when we first started. It was a situation where we were playing in the parking lot of skate shops and trying to get people to pay attention. But the one thing we always had was that we had a connection with an audience. Whether it was 20 people or 200 people, there were people that were there and dug what we were doing. So in many ways, I can't speak to. It would be disingenuous for me to speak to what it's like to come from a no fan base and build it up. For whatever reason, we connected with, whether it was a small number of people, yes, but we connected with people pretty quickly. So the staying power or the idea of keeping an audience is the thing that really, I guess, was the number one driving factor for us, was connecting with our fans or our friends or whoever was coming to the show, and really trying to maintain that level of connection. A lot of that's kind of luck of the draw. We happen to have a music video that did well on YouTube. There was no outlets for music videos apart from that, so that was an opportunity. I don't know why that happened. I wish I could pinpoint the reason for that success, but in many ways, we sound like a broken record in some capacity when we say it comes down to perseverance and hard work.
How do you separate yourself? What do you have to bring to the table that you haven't seen or heard before?
Kind of brings us full circle to like the beginning of the conversation. Yeah, like what you were
that's
saying.
how we started too. Like that was our drive behind us. It's like the scene was sort of dead, and the groups that you mentioned already were people that influenced us. But then we were like, there's this hole right now, sonically or visually, or a concept and stuff, and so the bands that you listed and the bands that we grew up that we liked as well. What's missing, and then how do we differentiate ourselves? He's an individual, like so on and so forth. And when we get together, well, we're going to only sound like we're going to sound, and no one else is going to sound like that.
That's okay. Copy the things that you love until you find something that is true about your own artistic abilities in it. That's what all of us did. I wrote fucking Hybrid Moments 900 times and thought that I wrote the song when I was a kid, you know what I mean? And I know that there's a certain element of like, snarky, like, oh yeah, that guy does copy everything. I get it, right? Like, and totally fuck you because you're not getting what I'm saying if you do think that, because copying something or feeling something, it only comes from a genuine love for it. And if you need help in developing who you are, take the things that you really love and adapt them to yourself until you find the things that are you about it. Canada was because Bob wanted to get us away from home, really. I mean, really, he legitimately said to us, I don't want you in LA with the distractions of being at home. Let's get out of LA and let's make
Bob's
a record.
Canadian.
And Bob's Canadian. And honestly, he wanted to use the same console that he used on the Black Album, which used to be at a different studio called Little Mountain in Vancouver. That was then moved to a studio in Gastown in Vancouver, and Bryan Adams owns the studio. And so we wound up making the record there because he wanted to use the same console. Also, we did all the vocals on the record in Vancouver, and he wanted to. I didn't use an isolation booth, and I didn't wear headphones on the record. Sang everything live, and there was a huge live loft room in that studio that we could use for that. So it was all kind of by design.
I mean, yeah. As a kid, I was always very quiet, and music was always my outlet. I would lock myself in my room and play guitar for hours every day. That was just my only escape, really. Guitar, violin, and I got picked on a lot in school. I was weird. I wore Metallica shirts and I played in the orchestra. I was whatever. I was myself, and I wasn't going to be anybody else. And I stuck to my guns, and like I say, eventually I found these guys, and I found an outlet and a way to speak my mind and still be myself and be accepted for who I am.
For me personally, I've always done it myself, and then the people who, like, we have guitar techs and stuff on tour who set them up, but I've always set my guitars up myself to how I like it, and then show them to do it like that.
Before we're done, I wanted to just talk to you guys a little bit about how you think it's benefited you having a manager who does what you do also, you know, who actually really understands what you do.
I often get asked the question, how does your manager balance being an active musician and also being your manager? Isn't it too much? And the simple answer is, I've never noticed. In all the years that he's been our manager, yes, he is a rock star who plays on big, huge stages in front of, 20,000 people. But he answers my emails and my phone calls and my texts. And
probably other managers who ask you that too, right?
Yeah, when I need something in my life, I go to him. So many things, because I met Blasko when I was like 17. So many things in my life, from the first time I ever bought a car to anything, he's been there with me. I have an incredible love and respect for the position that he has as a musician and as a manager. And I think it's completely possible and probable that if you have the interest and are intellectually stimulated by the music business, you can do multiple jobs and you can do multiple things if you're good at them and you care about them. I just want to say thank you so much, guys, for coming down tonight. As someone who has no form of education, I didn't even finish high school. I have such an incredible level of respect, and I truly do. And I was telling him this earlier. Previously in my life, I had almost a level of hatred towards schooling because it didn't fit with me. I grew up in an area where education was not put on a level where it wasn't stimulating. People didn't want to give you information. It was learning for the testing, and then eventually you forget everything. And so people who do pursue their dreams and go to college and want to seek further education, to me, I not only look up to those people because they're the people who ultimately in this world make the biggest difference, but I envy you guys for having such passion to go after what you want in the world. There needs to be new bands, and there needs to be people who truly care about it and don't just put the love and respect of rock music into people that are 40 years older than you and don't give a fuck about you. Care about your own generation and the young bands that are coming up. Whether you believe that they're as good as many of the classic rock bands that we love or not, we need to have love and understanding for these younger bands, because the industry will die if all we care about are what people would call the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs are the bands that we look up to the most, and I understand that that's what many of you guys look up to the most, but we need to have a real meeting of the minds in rock and roll to bring back the feeling of youth and community, because it will completely die if we're not responsible for it. Promoters refuse to put bands that cannot sell out sheds into larger rooms, and they refuse to groom these bands because they stand to make an exponential amount of money off of people who have already proven themselves, and I get it. A band like Kiss, Motley Crue, AC/DC, these bands can fill those sheds. But when promoters and other people refuse to give the chance to younger bands and refuse to let these bands grow, and radio refuses to play these younger bands, and they're only playing 6 hours of Metallica a night while we enjoy listening to it, the industry dies every single day. You have to make the greatest band. Everyone that wants to be in a band has to work their ass off. You have to kick all of our ass, every band that exists. And I believe that anyone else can, because we don't possess some God-given gift. Anybody that's in a successful band was not shit from the sky, just people that work hard or had a thing about them that worked. Allow for people to talk shit, and don't be afraid to show your middle finger, because I might be the Golden Gods fuck you guy, but people fucking remember that moment.
Exactly, and respected it. All right, guys, thanks so much for coming out to this thing, and we hope
Thanks,
to see
guys.
you at
Appreciate
another
it.
one.